not even hardly related to the subject or to the question. One of them is fairly related and the other one is correct. So you only have to worry about 2 questions for your 4-question test, your multiple guess test. They do that because they want you to know what is involved or what are you talking about in the student manual. If you don't have one, it'd be advisable for you to pick one up so you can use it after you get your license. There's lots and lots of information in these student manuals that the little brochure that Linda gave you doesn't have, okay? So I'd suggest you do that. For the sake of time, let's go. We're going to talk about control operators, control type, control operators required, eligibility, designation of so on and so forth. This stuff that we just talked about before is a continuation of it. When is an amateur station permitted to transmit out without a control operator? Never, right. There always has to be someone operating the radio. Who may be the control operator of a station communicating through an amateur satellite or space station? Who may be? Raise your hand if you know the answer. Who? Any technician. Any amateur whose license privilege allows them to transmit on the satellite uplink. So look for the key words in the question. Who may designate the station control operator? Okay, remember you got a station control operator and a station licensee. When you get your license, you got those 2 parts to it. So who designates the control operator of a station? The licensee does, right. What determines the transmitting privileges of an amateur station? Very simple, basic question. The class of license you got. Okay. What is an amateur station control point? Anybody got an amateur radio here tonight? Okay. What's the control point on that radio? Yeah, it's where the knobs and the buttons and all the things are that you use to make the radio work. That's the control point. The location at which the control operator functions the performance of the radio. When, under normal circumstances, may a technician class licensee be the control operator of a station operating in the exclusive amateur extra class segment of the band? No time, right. He's only authorized in his classification. Amateur general gives you a little more information, control privileges. Amateur extra gives you all of them. Okay. If there's a question, don't forget to raise your hand. Which of the following is an example of automatic control? Your repeaters, right. We have lots of them around. I have here a little handout that I printed off of the website. And if you can see the lines up through here, these are the paths of the signals coming from various hubs in our system. I can pass that around and you can look at it if you like. Those are those linked repeaters we were talking about earlier. The VHF Society of Utah maintains all those radios. Right. This booklet you can get and get the updated version by sending a check off to Utah VHF Society, and they'll mail you out the book. And it's just jam-packed with information. Okay? It answers questions about like what frequency, who's the operator, what tone codes are required to make the repeaters work, and so on.
And when you're saying who's the operator,
Yes.
of the station, is that determined by the group? Or, you know,
I can be the licensee and build the station. I can determine someone else to be the control operator. Okay? I can be the control operator because I am the licensee, or I can tell someone else to.
And that's on the repeater?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Which of the following is an example of remote control as defined by Part 97? Remote control is the key word. Operating a station over the internet, such as Echolink or IRLP. You probably never heard of those, but they are repeater or programs that can be used over the internet to access repeaters. Okay? So it's very interesting. If you got a smartphone, you've got your radio wherever you go, as long as you have access to the internet. Pretty slick. Who does the FCC presume to be the control operator of an amateur station unless documentation to the contrary is in the station records? The licensee, right. All right, we're moving on to another section here. When must the station licensee make the station and its records available to the FCC inspectors? Anytime they want it. We're not required to keep a station log anymore, but how do you keep track of what's going on with your station unless you write it down or use some other type of information on there? They may ask you dates, times, and places of types of communication you've had. Okay. That's up to you to decide how you do it. When must the station licensee make, okay, just read that one. When using tactical identifiers such as race headquarters during a community service net operation, how often must you identify with the FCC station? Every 10 minutes and at the end of a conversation with another person. Okay? If you're the control operator and you have lots of satellite stations around a race course, you'll want to have those people check in periodically to inform what's going on. Every time you end the conversation with Bill over here, you have to identify with your call sign. Then you can say race control, whatever your name is. We have our conversation. We end off, you have to use your call sign. Okay.
Both of you do?
Well, yes, you both do because you both are separate operators. He's using one radio, I'm using one. He's using a different radio. You're using a different radio, see? Yeah. At the end of every conversation, and if your conversation is much longer, at least every 10 minutes. You'll probably get in the habit of doing it quite regular, like every 2 or 3 minutes. When an amateur station requires to transmit its call sign, when is an amateur station required to transmit its call sign? Every 10 minutes. It's just a different way of saying that. Yes.
If you're having a conversation with another person, how will it figure it?
Just with your call sign.
So
means
Yep.
you're done.
We're done talking here. 7-3s.
If,
K7ZI.
try to remember to paraphrase questions for those on Zoom.
Okay.
They're not gonna hear it.
They're not hearing this? Okay.
They're gonna not hear the question, they're hearing you, but they're not hearing his question.
Hearing his question.
So just
Okay, they're recording this, so speak up possibly so Ron can hear it and that we can send it to the guys in Alaska. All right. Which of the following is an acceptable language? Keywords to use for station identification when operating in the phone subband. So when you're speaking, what's an acceptable language?
English.
Thank you.
I got one more point on that too.
Yes.
Any of your airlines, shipping, anywhere in the world, the language is English. We use English.
Throughout the world, the general default language for amateur radio work is English. The Spaniards will talk English. The Japanese will talk English as you get into high frequency, long distance communication. Yes, Sylvia?
A lot of times you will hear on HF, they will carry on their conversation in their normal language, but they must identify in English. And
Very
give
good.
their call sign in English, but they can carry on their conversation between identifications in their normal language, but they must give their call sign in English.
Okay,
That
Sylvia?
is what that phonetic alphabet is all about. Everyone in the world hears those same phonetic words, so that way you can hear someone from Japan's call sign, because they'll use, you know, the same identifying words when we're giving the call sign phonetically.
Now, along with identification, the next question is, what method of call sign identification is required for a station transmitting phone signals? What kind of identification? Send the call sign using either Morse code, which is CW, or verbal English language. Our repeater out here on Iron Mountain identifies itself using CW. Okay. Ken Mumford's repeater on Iron Mountain identifies with a voice words. This is the N7KM repeater. Either way is correct. Which of the following formats of a self-assigned indicator is acceptable when identifying using a phone transmission? This is kind of misleading wording here. But what they're talking about is you use your call sign with a slant line or stroke or whatever, and the area in which you're located. In other words, K7ZI, if I was in the state of Georgia, would use my call sign, but I would punctuate it by saying stroke 4, K7ZI 4. Okay, that gives the designation that I'm in the area of the call districts that have 4 in their call sign. Does that make sense? Okay. That's kind of a strange one. Which of the following formats? Think of that word, format. Now, if you've read your book, you'll understand what they're talking about there. Which of the following restrictions apply when non-licensed persons is allowed to speak to a foreign station using a station under the control of a technician class control operator? Okay, that's kind of wordy in there. So let's go over it again. Which of the following restrictions apply when a non-licensed person is allowed to speak to a foreign station using a station under the control of a technician class licensee? Can you understand that? The foreign station must be one with which the U.S. has third-party agreements. All right, who's the first party? You are. Who's the second party?
Receiver.
The guy receiving the signal. Who's the third party? The unlicensed person that you're allowing to talk on your radio. Okay. Yes?
Even when you're doing third party locally, you have to identify your call sign saying your call sign with third party traffic. And then you turn it over to the unlicensed operator. And then you take it back and you give your call sign again to say end of third party traffic.
That's what we're going to get to in the next question. Sylvia was talking about third-party traffic, when you're allowing someone else to use your radio, licensed or not. You're trying to indicate and make it very clear to whoever is listening that there's going to be a third person involved in this two-way communication. Okay?
It's not licensed.
Pardon?
It's not licensed.
Licensed or not.
Oh, okay.
Okay. What is meant by the term third-party communication? We just talked about that. A message from a control operator to another amateur station who's a control operator on behalf of another person. It didn't say unlicensed, it just said another person.
But remember, whenever you let someone use your station, you are responsible for what they transmit.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm missing something here. When do you notify the person on the other end that's going to be a third party?
Just not
Before the third party starts talking. It's just to try to keep things as plain and clear as you can possibly do. Wouldn't hurt to put that in your station log that you did through party traffic there in case the FCC comes and wants to look at your records. Who is accountable should a repeater inadvertently retransmit communication that violate the FCC rules? Go ahead.
Whoever's speaking, whoever's transmitting.
Well, it's the control operator of the originating station. Okay? So if your repeater malfunctions, the person responsible for that station that's causing the malfunction is responsible, the control operator, whether it's the licensee or the designated control operator. Okay. Any question? All right. Which of the following is a requirement for the issuance of a club station license grant? All right. Rainbow Canyon Amateur Radio Club has a license. How many people must be in the club minimum?
4.
At least 4. Okay, that's the answer, at least 4. Operating procedures. Now's where we're really going to get into the radio and how to make it work and function correctly. All right. Which of the following is a common repeater frequency offset in the 2-meter band?
What's the 9600 kilohertz?
Okay, do you know what an offset is? When you're using a repeater, you use 2 frequencies. You use the transmit frequency and you use the receive frequency. Now, if this gentleman would key up his radio, and the instant he keys his radio, you'll see the frequency change by 600 kilohertz on the 2-meter band. All right. It changes 5 megahertz on the 77 centimeter band. So that's the offset. That's the change in frequency. When you let your finger off the transmit button, it jumps right back to the receive frequency. A little technical there, but that's the way that the things are designed.
And can that offset throw you out of the band if you're too close?
Well, the band plan is designed to prevent out-of-band operation. The frequencies are set inside the band far enough that you won't transmit outside the band. See how it all kind of fits together? Yes.
Does your radio do that automatically, or do you have to tell it?
You have to program it to do that. And it's done by the frequency range and the offset depending on which band or frequency you're operating on. Which is the national calling frequency for FM simplex operation in the 2-meter band. It's 146.520. No offsets, no PL tones, nothing like that. It's just, you're talking on that frequency, 146.52. What is a common repeater frequency offset for the 70 centimeter band? We just talked about 2 meters. Now we're talking about 70 centimeters.
Plus or minus 5 megahertz.
5 megahertz. Before we were 600 kilohertz. When you get up into the 70 centimeter band, then it's 5 megahertz. It's a big jump. Which is an appropriate way to call another station on a repeater, if you know the other station's call sign. There is a procedure, a set order.
Call them on their call sign.
You call the person's call sign, then you give your call sign. And that's the way you end the conversation as well. Say the station's call sign, then identify with your call sign as the answer. How should you respond to a station calling CQ? What in the world is CQ?
What's Jodie Foster say in that movie?
Okay. That there is an abbreviation for a request to talk to someone who's monitoring. You don't care who. It's just a general term that we pick up and use and throw out there. CQ, 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 K7ZI. Yeah, it just means I just want to talk to somebody. If you want to talk to somebody specific, then of course you use the person's call sign if you know it. Any question? Now these terms like CQ and QSL, QRO, there's a list in the back of your manual here, and it wouldn't hurt for you to become familiar with the ones that are commonly used. You don't need to memorize them all, because as you go through amateur radio and you have conversations, you'll start to hear and understand the most commonly used ones. Just remember there is a list in the back of the book. Which of the following is required when making on-the-air test transmissions? To see if your equipment's working. What's required?
Your call number.
Yeah, your call sign, that's all. Identify with the transmitting station's call sign. What is meant by repeater offset? We just talked about these. It's the difference between the transmit signal and the receive signal. Okay? Okay. What is the meaning of the procedural sign CQ? I've already read that. Calling any station. What brief statement indicates that you are listening on a repeater and looking for a contact. Yeah, that's all you have to do. You may want to put on there monitoring or some other word that indicates that you're listening on that frequency. You don't have to sit there and constantly call and call and call. There's a lot of people out there listening, and they don't necessarily have to answer you back.
And just using the word listening is often heard.
Yeah.
On a repeater.
Which is a band plan beyond the privileges established by the FCC. There it is, right there. Utah VHF Society's band plan. It's a voluntary, agreed upon gentleman's agreement of frequencies and procedures used in the state of Utah. Voluntary is the answer. And it's a guideline for the use of different modes and different activities of the repeater. What term describes an amateur station that is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency? What term?
Simplex.
Simplex, right. Transmitting and receiving on the same frequency. Which of the following is a guideline when choosing an operating frequency for calling CQ? There's that CQ again. What's an acceptable procedure? And this is in generally all the time you get on the radio and want to listen to, or
So if you can get on that frequency.
yeah, you listen to see if it's busy. That only takes 10 seconds. Then you can ask, is the frequency being used? Somebody may have stepped away from their radio momentarily in the middle of a transmission. And they'll come back and say, yes, it's in use. Then you have to wait. And make sure that you are in your assigned band. In other words, so make sure that you are operating your radio within the privileges of your license. All of those choices are correct and appropriate. What is the most common use of the reverse split function on a VHF, UHF transceiver? You'll hear that quite common when you join NITS. Anybody hear him on reverse? Okay. What is the common function or the use of the split, reverse split? Come on, you guys.
Listen to the repeaters and input frequencies.
Listen to the repeater's input frequency. Remember, when you key your radio, it changes frequency. So what you're going to do is turn them around. You're going to listen to the input to the repeater with your radio in the receive mode. So that's the meaning of reverse split or reverse. They sometimes just designate it reverse. Listening on a repeater's input frequency. It's just a procedure. Simple, one single button push on your control panel. Yes.
When you're gonna talk to a repeater, does your radio send like a PL tone or something to wake the repeater up, or is it just always listening on it?
Does my radio use a PL tone to wake up the repeater? Most repeaters today require some type of PL or CTCSS tone to wake up the repeater. It'll stay numb until it gets that control frequency. Now, CTCSS is the correct term for PL tone. It's controlled continuous tone continuous tone coded squelch system. It is a sub-audible tone. In other words, it's a tone below our normal hearing range. If the repeater doesn't hear that tone and it's been programmed for that, it won't work. It'll just sit there and ignore your call. The purpose for that is to reduce interference. You get up to Bryan Head and you call the 7.6 repeater out here on Iron Mountain. You can also hit the 7.6 in Arizona. But with the PL tone, Arizona doesn't hear you, even though the signal's going there. It only wakes up the one on Iron Mountain. So most of the repeaters today require or use this subaudible PL tone.
Is that built in the radio?
No, you program that into your radio. Most of the
The squelch is something you adjust.
Yeah, you can adjust that in the programming of the parameters for that repeater. Okay, you have the offset, then you have the PL tone, or you can also use a tone pad. There's another program designed in the repeaters that uses the tone pad like you have on your telephone there. The two tones, the two signals. So just be aware of that. But further, as far as the answer goes, it is using this CTCSS, an abbreviation for continuous tone coded squelch system. We frequently say PL. It's meaning the same thing.
Abbreviated is personal link.
Yes. If a station is not strong enough to keep a repeater's receiver squelch open, which of the following might you use to receive the station signal? This is another way of saying reverse. If the station is not strong enough to keep a repeater's signal squelch open, which of the following might allow you to receive the station's signal?
Listen on the repeater input frequency.
Say it again.
Listen on the repeater input frequency.
Right. That's going to reverse. All you're doing is switching your radio to a different frequency, which the repeater's looking for, to see if the person is strong enough to hit the repeater. Sometimes he doesn't have the PL tone in his radio programmed correctly, and he's strong into the repeater, but the repeater's not going to hear him. It's not going to work correctly until he readjusts his radio with the proper parameters. Okay, which of the following could be the reason you are unable to access a repeater whose output you can hear? They give you three things here. Improper transmit offset. The repeater may require a proper CTCSS for your transmitter. The repeater may require a proper DCS tone for your transceiver. And all of those are correct. DCS is digital tone squelch. Okay. It's just another way of protecting the repeater from interference. What might be the problem if a repeater user says your transmissions are breaking up on voice peaks?
You're talking too loudly.
You're talking too loudly. That could be one of the reasons. In actuality, it's usually you don't talk loud enough into your microphone. Okay. FM repeaters and FM transmitters require pretty good volume going into the device. You can put it right up against your mouth and talk at a normal high level like I am now, and overdrive the repeater or the FM transmitter. Talking in a normal voice, a couple inches from the microphone, is perfectly satisfactory for the operation of that radio. These are things that you'll learn and experience as you get your license and start talking on your radio. But it's just what the license or the test questions is asking you. Okay, I don't have a page. Yeah, I do on page 28 of your book. You see this little diagram right here? That's the same one you have on your telephone. That's the DCS pad. Okay? And when you push a button, you hear two tones come out of it. And you can program the repeater, if it requires it, to hear and act and operate depending on what buttons you push. Okay, here's what the question is. What type of tones, plural, are used to control repeaters linked by the Internet Relay Linking Project, or IRLP for short? It's called the DTMF, and that stands for Dual Tone Multi-Frequency, and that's that keypad on your telephone. Anybody got their phone here and want to push a couple of buttons so people can hear that, or are you familiar with it? You're familiar with it, aren't you? Good. How can you join a digital repeaters talk group? There's the key words, digital repeater talk group. How can you join them?
Program the radio with the group's ID or code.
Yeah. You have to put the proper things into your radio so that it will work. The answer: program your radio with the group's ID or codes. Which of the following applies when two stations transmitting on the same frequency interfere with each other? And you'll hear this happen. It happens all the time.
Be nice, job, whatever.
Yeah.
Courtesy.
It's a gentleman's agreement. No one owns the frequency. You can just simply say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Go ahead and talk, you know. The answer: common courtesy should prevail, but no one has exclusive rights to the frequency. It's also called doubling. Or if you get more signals in the internet than that, it's really a mess. What is a talk group on a DMR digital repeater? Now, here's another set of initials. What does DMR mean? Okay, it's a way for a group of users to share a channel at different times without being heard by other users on that channel. You'll find this is the case when you use D-Star or C4MF and other digital modes out there. D-Star is common with, is it ICOM uses D-Star, or is it Kenwood?
I think all of them do.
Both of them use ICOM or D-Star.
And I think Kenwood does.
And C4MF is the same thing, but it's by Yaesu. Why do they use different terminology? I guess it's just a selling point.
Well, they're proprietary too.
Yeah, it's a little different the way they set up their programming. But that's what it is, a talk group on a DMR digital repeater. Around here, we don't really have a digital repeater. But in bigger cities, you'll run into that because of the congestion, okay? Okay, new topic here. Which Q signal indicates that you are receiving interference from another station? In the back of your book is a list of these Q signals. The one they're looking for is interference, and it's QRM. There's also another one that's close to it, QRN. It means different things. You can look in the back of your book for the answer at your leisure. What Q signal indicates that you are receiving interference? QRM. Which Q signal indicates that you are changing frequency? They're looking for QSY. Yes.
How do you receive these signals?
Pardon me?
How do you receive QXY?
How do you know what they are?
Does it show up on your radio?
No, you hear that.
You just hear them.
Someone's saying, I'm going to QSY, or I'm receiving QRN. Okay, it's just an abbreviation for meaning that you're being interfered with, or you're picking up static, or you're changing frequency, or you're asking them what frequency you're on. There's a whole list of these Q signals.
The Q signals originated from back in the Morse code only time, in which it was, a common issue. Instead of having to say, say the whole line of words, they condensed it to like 3 letters, starting with Q. So that's where all these different Q codes come from. And it's just a way of very shortly, in a very short way, it's literally 3 words or 3 letters to tell a big meaning.
Yes, Sylvia, I see your hand.
Just for an example, QRM means man-made noise or interference. QRN is natural noise interference.
Yes. Sylvia is making the distinction between QRM, or QR Mary, and QR Nancy, QRN. The M is man-made interference, and the other is natural static or uncontrolled interference, okay? So if a person's talking on a nearby frequency and it's interfering with your radio, it's QR Mary. If it's just power line noise coming in down the road, it's QR Nancy. Okay? We're splitting hairs there. It's still interference. I will read the answer. We're talking about changing frequency. QSY. Shall I change frequency? Shall I change to another frequency? Can be asked as a question. Or I am changing to another frequency as a statement. A list of the common Q signals is in the appendix on page 83 of this manual. Why are simplex channels designated in the VHF-UHF band plan? Why are simplex channels? Simplex, yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, so you don't have to tie up a repeater, you're not messing with the repeater.
Precisely. Simplex operation is close range communication between 2 radios. When you use a repeater, you're tying up that repeater and preventing other people from using it at that time. They may have more important traffic than what you do. That's a problem with a system like the VHF Society and the linked repeaters. You'll get some guys on there that just talk incessantly for half an hour or something like that. It's actually breaking the gentleman's rules to keep your conversation short, like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever is necessary. So it's communicate without tying up the repeater is the correct answer. When may SSB phone. Now, SSB means single sideband phone mode, be used in transmitting may be used in amateur bands above 50 megahertz. When may single sideband phone mode be used above 50 megahertz? At least some portion of all the bands. I'll get this book out here. Somewhere in here. I'm probably taking up too much time. There it is. There's a breakdown of the bands and the plans within that band of different frequencies. Okay, that's why one of these little booklets like this is so valuable, so that you know where you can communicate CW wise, where you can communicate digital wise, where you can communicate radio controlled aircraft, and so on. It's all spelled out for you in the band plan. Okay. Which of the following describes a linked repeater network? Which of the following describes a linked repeater network? I sent around that page. There it is. Okay. The linked repeater means more than one, right? In our system, there's like 20 or so different repeaters that are all tied together. That's linked. So here it is. Which of the following describes a linked repeater network? The answer, a network of repeaters where signals received by one repeater are repeated by all repeaters. So when you get on the 9-4 machine out here on Frisco Peak, you're talking from St. George clear into Salt Lake, and everybody in between can hear you.
Las Vegas, Idaho,
Yeah.
Arizona.
And
all
further. Those are about the distances that this linking system is. It goes a little bit further north. But there's other systems that link into these. And if they turn on their link, you can talk clear into Wyoming, clear into Montana, clear into Idaho. You just don't know where it's going. So just be careful with what you're doing. If you're going to use the repeater, just understand there's a lot of ears out there. In Washington State, there is a network of repeaters called the Evergreen Internet that covers western Montana to Seattle, Washington, and from Vancouver, BC to Northern Oregon. Wow, big country, isn't there? Anyway, the answer, a network of repeaters where signals received by one repeater are retransmitted through other repeaters. What do the FCC rules not, when do the FCC rules not apply to the operation of amateur stations? Very simple. You just got an answer correct. Never. The FCC's rules are there for the specific purpose of controlling amateur radio and other systems as well. What is meant by the term NCS in the network operation? NCS, say?
Network control station.
It stands for Net Control Station, right. We have a net control, a net every night at 9 o'clock and also 7 o'clock in the morning. And someone in our group is the net control operator. So that's what he does is uses the net control station, keeps control and orderly communication for the group. Which should be done when using voice modes to ensure that voice messages containing unusual words are received correctly. Voice modes, speaking, ensure that voice messages containing unusual words are received correctly. Spell them out, right. Your phonetics. And if you use common phonetics, it's easier for the other station to copy. Conditions might be such that it's causing interference. The repeater might have noise on it. Every time the wind blows hard out there on Iron Mountain, the 7.6 goes crazy. We're all aware of that.
When does it not blow hard?
That's why it's called Little Horn.
Okay. Spell out the words and use common phonetics. What do races and airs have in common? This is remembering what Bill said about races. What does races stand for? Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services. And airs, Radio Amateur Emergency Services. What do they have in common? Yeah, right. Both organizations may provide communications during an emergency. What does the term traffic refer to in net operation? Traffic. Talking about formal messages or information. Formal messages exchanged by the net station. Which of the following is an acceptable practice to get the immediate attention of a net control station when reporting an emergency? He's usually in charge of the group, okay? You can break in at any time and declare an emergency. How would you get his attention to do that?
Emergency or
Yeah, emergency. Just jump in there and say emergency. Or priority. Just any way you can get a hold of that guy and get the other people off the air.
Make the call sign and say emergency.
Yeah, that gives an indication of who's calling. Saves a little bit of time is using your call sign. The answer: begin your transmission by saying priority or emergency, followed by your call sign. Which of the following is accepted practice for an amateur operator who has checked into a net? Standard procedure when checking into a net. You just sit there and start talking? Right, you wait your turn until you get called on. The answer: remain on frequency without transmitting until asked to do so by the net control station. This is just common sense, basically, and you'll pick that up the more you use your radio. Which of the following is characteristic of good traffic handling? Okay, what's traffic now? A message, so we're talking about messages now. Which of the following is a characteristic of good traffic handling?
repeating what you actually heard.
Repeating exactly what you hear, okay? In your book, you'll also see this thing right here. That's called a radiogram, all right? And it's been developed over a period of time to give a lot of information and to make sure that you have concise passing of traffic or messages. Down here in the message area, there's room for 25 words, numbers, or symbols only. That's all the more information you can put on one message. If your message contains more than that, there are abbreviations, numbered abbreviations. Just be aware of that. You don't have to spell everything out if you have a long bunch of information to give out.
You can't go over 25 words.
25 words is all you can put on this radiogram. Okay. Are amateur station operators ever permitted to operate outside of the privileges of their license? Common sense, no. During emergencies, you can transmit outside your operating privileges, but it darn well better be an emergency. Because what happens if you don't? You can lose your license. You worked hard for it. Protect it. Okay, back to this radiogram again. What information is contained in the preamble of a formal traffic message? Now, the preamble is this line right here below the big black one, the top. That's the preamble. What information is contained in there? What they're looking for is tracking the message. The information necessary to track the message from inception to the end receiver. Now, I won't go into it because that's a whole lesson in itself, just that form. Just be familiar with it. That's all you need to do to pass your test. What is meant by the term check in this form? Here's that blue arrow, and it's pointing up into that procedure line, and there's a block there that says check. What do they mean by check? The number of words or symbols or whatever in your message. So if you have a message that's 10 characters long, you count them up and you put that number up in the check block. It's a quick check to find out if something was left out of your message or added to the message. Remember, we only want to give what was originally given. What is an amateur radio emergency service? What is ARES? ARES is an organization of volunteers who volunteer and register their equipment and their time with that organizational group. ARES is mostly used in the eastern part of the United States. RACES is used in the western part of the United States. And they're commingled, it doesn't really matter. But for the state of Utah, it's RACES. You can, once you get your license, you can register with them and they'll issue you a number, and there's nets on a monthly basis that you can join, check in, keep it active. But it's for emergency purposes. Good organizations to become part of. I'll read the answer. Licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communication duties in public service. Okay, I think that's the end of it. Are there any questions that we've talked about, either from Bill's standpoint or from my standpoint? There's a question right there.
Back on page 25, we were talking about identifying, you said like W3 is your location.
Yes.
Is there a sheet or a page in here that shows what each one is?
Well,
W3 is probably not our location here.
What they have here is KL7CC stroke W3, KLCC slant W3, and KLCC slash WC. It's the same thing,
Same thing,
right,
but the W3 indicates your location.
right.
So where do you find out where your
Where,
location
yeah,
is?
Oh, that's in this book here,
oh,
yeah.
okay.
You can also see it on the ARR website. It's just divided the country up into 10 sections.
Oh,
So,
this is, oh,
so here in Utah, when you get your license, you'll probably say, you'll get the number 7. Because we're the 7th call.
Yeah.
Bill, we're your license.
So
In
in
California, his number is 6
yeah.
in his call sign.
So
I
we
was
would have
license
seven.
here, mine is 7.
Okay. I see this one, in the back of the book.
Yeah.
No, you usually keep your web. So like Bill lives here now, he still uses his call sign P6.
So you used to have to change it, but you don't anymore.
That's correct. FCC has changed some of their designations around. Once you get your license, you can keep that license. You don't have to have a license change when you move to a different call district.
Then you have to tell them that you're moved.
All you have to do is keep the address updated and you keep your original call sign. I just come back from 7QP, which is the 7th QSO party for the 7th call district, the 8 states in the 7th call district. And I had people with 1 in their call sign that were in Oregon, which is a 7th call district state. It kind of threw me off. I mean, boy, here I am almost doing DX. Oh, he's just in Oregon. So it's okay. Just be aware that when you're in a different call district, that you use a slant and then the number.
I got one question.
Yes.
You talk about other countries. Now, how do they do their call signs? Is it like we do?
They have their own set ones. That's part of the International Telecommunications Union agreement. Every country in the world has a specific designator or number. Some of them start with a 1 and go to 0. Some of them start with A and go to Z, and anything in between. New Zealand is a ZL. South Africa is a ZS. Okay? Japan is a J. America is A's, N's, W's, and K's. It starts at the beginning of your call sign.
Your Canada will be V, Mexico will be
VE,
X.
yeah. VA, VE.
Yeah.
Okay. Every nation has their own designation, and every nation has their own form of FCC that governs those type of radio operations in
And
their
what's
country.
special about your call sign will be unique to you worldwide. So no one else in the entire world will have the exact same call sign as you. If you can talk to anybody you want. So that's what's kind of fun about having a call sign, because it's uniquely identified. In fact, when we get into this more, you'll hear us first be started by our first name and our call sign. Took me a long time to learn a lot of people's last names, because we never use them.
Now, you were talking about the law.
Okay, any other questions? One in the back.
At some point in our series of classes, will you talk about where to buy radios or recommend or how to set them up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's forthcoming. Purchasing equipment can be bought secondhand very cheaply. You can buy inexpensive radios that are brand new and require some pretty sophisticated programming, or you can buy new quality radios at an upper price. So start off light and start off cheaply. And remember, the best part of the radio is the antenna. Okay, would you hold up your radio, please? See that thing sticking out of the end of his radio? That's called a rubber duck antenna. It's not much better than a dummy load, a 50 watt, 50 ohm resistor. If you want that radio to perform, you get a better antenna for it. Okay?
I got one more question.
Yes.
You were talking about a log. When you talk on your radio, you should keep a log, or if I talk to you, should I log it?
You don't have to, you can. Anything that's special out of the ordinary, then you really ought to log it down somewhere. Date, time, and place.
What would that include, or what kind of things would you log?
If you're talking to somebody that has an emergency, if you're talking to somebody that's having interference problems from another radio operator or other service.
And then also, just for fun, it's the idea that I contacted Japan. I like to keep track of all my contacts worldwide, statewide. You get awards for working in every state, working in every county.
Oh, yeah.
There's actually a question of your certificates. I have a certificate for every continent, of every state. You just kind of work with these things. There's places that keep track of that, and you get to a certain point, and you get a little certificate that they want. It's fun.
Yeah.
I have a map on there, and I can see where all the different countries you're asking about. I can see where all the different countries were.
You guys right now are at the tip of the iceberg. Okay? There's a lot out there in amateur radio.
That we're not gonna learn here.
You're going to learn it right here.
Class, the general license, then you can start making international calls.
A lot of it's going to be personal desire. Some of you are not going to want to do voice communication. You're only going to want to use a computer. That's very popular nowadays.
I didn't know you could do that.
Some of us old timers like to pound brass, send Morse code. That's a whole different language that you have to learn for that. A lot of our class members here are learning how to do Morse code. Now, then there's one that's working on it. So is our club president here. I think Ron is too, aren't you?
Also, CW class.
The master in the area is Ken Munford. That man can carry on a conversation like between you and me and copy code at the same time. He can copy it up to 30 words per minute. My ears are getting old and I can only get pretty decent copy to 20. I can do 25, but it's broken. It's just too fast for me to mentally make the change.
I'm doing about 5 or 6.
And that's perfectly acceptable, okay? You start off with 1 word per minute. What is did-all be? Oh my heavens, there's 26 characters. There's 10 numbers, there's procedural call signs. What is did-all? It's the letter A. And when you pick up your speed over a period of time, then you start copying letters, words instead of letters. That's how you speed things up. But if somebody throws in an unusual word, you don't know what it is going that fast. And that's where everybody's going to computers, because they type words on the computer reads it over the air, prints it out on the screen. All you got to do is be able to read fast. Very, very.
And the computer can send the characters very fast.
Yes.
You can get
Very
bigger
accurate.
messages.
And the new modes are, and this is what's really amazing, is there's new modes out there that can pick out information in the noise. The weak signal, which is just generally white noise. There's all kinds of modes out there for that.
Well, how do you use a computer to talk on the ham? I don't understand.
Let's come over to my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to go over to his house.
It's coming. It's coming.
That'd be pretty interesting, you know?
Basically, you have software that connects to your radio. And your radio basically just transmits up to, I live in that every Tuesday, and that's based out of Washington.
So actually you program your radio into your computer or vice versa.
Well, actually, you have software that controls your radio. And so you type in the messages or you receive the message, it goes through your radio, and this transmits it to the
Oh, it's
Remember
wide
when
open.
we mentioned that 9 o'clock, we have that, I have that on here, so if you want to listen to it a little bit, you're welcome to. And remember, you need a license to transmit, but you can always listen. So if you want to go ahead and get a radio and start listening to our conversation, go ahead and we'll help you program it.
I can hear it. Then we're going to get over there. Yeah. I can hear you.